Hello and welcome. This is Working Class to World Class. But before we go any further, I do have a little favour of you. If you could hit that follow or subscribe button, then that would be a massive help. Thank you. In this episode, I chat with a working class lad all the way from Glasgow who tells me about his rising career, which now sees him working for one of the biggest influencers in marketing. Breaking through the barriers of adversity. I'm Lynn Lester, and this is Working Class to World Class. So Allan, thank you so much for being on the show today.
That's all right. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I know, and obviously for people listening, they're going to detect that Scottish accent. So where are you from?
I'm from Glasgow originally, just outside Glasgow. So I grew up in Kilmacombe, which is on the west coast, but I'm originally from further down the west coast, Port Glasgow, Greenock area.
Only across the water from me. I'm in Clydebank. I'm here now, actually, as we record. So yeah, people assume I'm in London. I'm like, nah, never left my hometown. So born and bred here. So for people tuning in, can you describe who are you and what do you do? Because there's a lot of people that will have no idea. So yeah, let's just fill them in.
Sure. So I'm the head of strategy across Europe for Vayner Media. So Vayner Media is an advertising agency run by Gary Vaynerchuk. Some people might know who he is. He's a bit of an influencer in the marketing space, but also the kind of digital tech space and the kind of investment space as well. So he's someone that's made a big name for himself. One of the very first kind of like online influencers in the days before YouTube was even owned by Google. But he set up his own advertising agency, which is a through the line advertising agency, but is very much focused on being social first and kind of changing the way that marketing's done, kind of flipping it in its head from like big brand ideas down to more kind of like consumer centric up.
Wow, and that sounds really complicated and fancy for people that are not in marketing, but like, wow, this guy knows his stuff. So, I mean, to put this in perspective, right, to work for Gary Vee, that is a pretty big deal in itself. There's a lot of people I know in the marketing media industry that would bite your hand off for that job, and obviously you have it. So we're going to find out in a minute, you know, what's so special about Allan that he could climb the ladder and work for Gary Vee. But, you know, it's not just about Gary, it's about you, it's your journey. And, you know, let's go back. You sort of talked about where you were brought up. So why don't we just go back to the beginning and tell us where it all started?
Sure. So grew up as a kid, the west coast of Scotland, just outside Glasgow. My dad's a panel beater. My mum worked in a shop. Neither of them, you know, obviously been to, you know, both of them left school when they were about 15. And I was never really encouraged growing up to like go to college or university or anything like that. But I was just one of those kids that was naturally kind of clever at school and did quite well in most things, apart from maths. I failed maths 3 times before I passed it. But yeah, I just kind of naturally did well. Loved reading as a little kid, and it obviously got me into like kind of education and stuff. So when it got to the latter stages of school, I was quite interested in going to university. No one in my family's ever been to university, and obviously the school were talking to me about it. It's not really something that my parents were encouraging me to do. And when I told them I wanted to do it, they were like utterly bemused. And I remember my mum was quite actively trying to stop me going. She just couldn't get my head around that I wanted to stay on in education and get more debt, not actually get out there and start earning money. But after a while, they knew I wasn't giving it up. It wasn't just a fad, so they supported me in it. So I left. I went to Stirling University, where I studied sociology and anthropology for 5 years, and I really enjoyed doing it. But I left not really knowing what I wanted to do. And during my time at university, I got involved in like the student newspaper and stuff like that. And I'm quite old, so it was back in the days before you could do like vocational degrees. But Stirling University, I think, had one of the first ever vocational degrees in the UK, which I think was PR at the time, which I did a little bit of as like a kind of optional subject. And I was like, this is kind of an interesting thing. I didn't know what PR was, right? I just thought journalists sat around and came up with stories and wrote them themselves. But when I found out about PR, I thought that was quite interesting. So I pursued that as a career. Spent about the first 10 years of my life trying to get into that. So obviously it wasn't that easy. So I spent a year or two doing like rubbish jobs, packing light bulbs in factories, working in call centres, all the usual stuff. I moved down to London in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think 99 maybe. And I got a job working for Motorola at the time. I don't know if you remember Motorola.
I do.
So it was effectively doing filing for them back. It was back in the days before anyone even before everyone actually had a computer on their desk. So I was literally doing like filing, and through that I got on quite well. Quite liked the people there, and they gave me a chance to work in their PR team, which was great. I was there for a few years. My boss left. She went somewhere else. She took me with her, which was she took me to BlackBerry at the time. Again, another defunct tech brand. And then she left again, and she took me to MySpace, another defunct tech brand. But that was right in the very early days of social media, and it was a bit of a whirlwind experience working at MySpace. Like, it was not, tech companies back then weren't like they are now. It was a bit of the kind of Wild West. It was crazy. Nobody knew what social media was. But that was a really, really interesting experience. It then obviously blew up and kind of like faltered. So that was probably about 10 years into my career. Maybe less than that, actually, maybe about 7. And I was kind of left not really knowing what to do. And I was just doing a bit of like freelancing gigs here and there, just little bits of marketing and PR. And one day a friend of mine called me that worked in the industry and said, "You still at MySpace?" And I said, "Oh no, I've left." And they went, "I've got an opportunity for you. There's an ad agency that I work with that doesn't know anything about social media and wants to understand it. Would you be up for having a chat with them?" He was a client at the time, so I said, "Yeah, sure." So he put me in contact with them. That was DDB at the time, and I had a chat with them, and they brought me in for I think it was a 3-week project to help them understand social media. And so I joined, helped them, won the bit of business that they were looking at, and then 7 years later, I was still there, and their head of strategy, and the company changed hands lots of times. So that was a really good way for me to kind of take the stuff that I'd learned in my PR background, the stuff that I'd learned working in tech and social media, and then take it to a whole new world. And it was a really, really, really great opportunity for me. Just like a really good opportunity at the right time when social media was blowing up. An established agency that was really big with great clients. And then at the time, whilst I was there, it was bought out it was merged with a smaller agency called Adam and Eve, which was like the hottest agency at the time, which then kind of helped grow the reputation of the business, but obviously grow my reputation with it. And from there, I've kind of moved around different ad agencies as like a senior strategy role. From there I went to JWT, and then I went to Engine, which I think is now called House 366, something like that. I was at Engine for 4 or 5 years, and I became good friends with my colleague that I used to work there. She left to come to Vayner Media, and about 6 months into her time here, she gave me a call and she said, "Would you be interested in coming and having a chat with us?" And the rest is history. I met everyone here, met Gary, and then joined, and then that was it. That was my story, my journey of how I got here.
Wow, okay, podcast over. That's great. So that was a whistle stop tour. Now, I want to take you back again, but before
Sure.
we do that, you've got one common denominator here. So we're talking Motorola, Nokia, MySpace. Are you the bad omen? What's going on here?
No. I mean, I think that was really interesting, right? Like, again, it was like the wild west of tech, right? So like this was just in fact, I first kind of started working in tech just before the first the first tech bubble burst and people were just chucking money at it, which is quite interesting. But I think, what I found really interesting about working in that, something that probably put me in good stead in the rest of my career, and as a point of view that I don't think a lot of people in advertising have. In tech, it's all about taking chances and making big bets and finding out what works and what doesn't work, but actually craving failure. So, like in tech, there's this understanding that success is an anomaly. Anyone can have success, and it's just good luck. But failure's guaranteed, and you can actually learn more from failure than you can from success. Coming into advertising, it's completely the opposite. Like people think you can manufacture success every single time, but you can't. It's luck. It's the failures that help you learn, build that resilience and stuff like that. So I think kind of it's almost built into kind of the success and failure of tech brands are those big bets that they take and the kind of successes that they have. I mean, I will say, I was at those businesses when they were successful.
Oh, absolutely.
It's only after I left that they fell apart.
Exactly. Well, you're the common denominator. If they don't have you, then, Gary B, watch out here. So, one thing you said was really interesting to me because you make this story sound really plain sailing, and I bet it wasn't. So you make it sound good. So we're going to delve into it a bit more because one of the sort of interesting things you talked about was when you went to uni, your mum tried to talk you out of it. So I don't want to know about that per se, but tell me about your parents as people. So if they left school at 15, what were they like?
Yeah, interesting. Like my old man's a bit like me. He's a bit like me, probably a bit more quiet and shy. I'm a bit of a loudmouth. But we're quite similar. Quite like, we like learning about things. Like my dad's not an academically clever person, but he just knows about. We're one of those people that knows about loads of stuff, right? And loves learning about stuff. And like, I think recently found out probably about 10 years ago, my son's really, really badly dyslexic, like really severely dyslexic, and I think my dad is as well. To be honest, like, when we met the psychologist, they talked about how it runs in the family and tested me. But I think my dad is as well. But he's one of those people that just loves finding out about things, and he's always got like a hobby on the go, and he gets really, really into it and knows all the history and knows how it works. And like, even though he doesn't like, he told me, even now you'll ask him about, like, he doesn't have Wi-Fi in his house, and I'll say, why not? And he goes, oh, the internet's a load of old rubbish. Still says that now, right? But he's really into photography, and when obviously when there was a shift from film to digital, he went and taught himself all about digital photography, and now he's like a wonder on Photoshop. Taught himself Photoshop, all this stuff. So he's like one of those kind of people. So obviously a great person to learn from. We've got a lot of similar kind of like likes and interests and stuff like that. About like love life and nature, find out about people, football, all that kind of stuff. My mum was probably kind of a bit more different. My mum was one of those people that probably just never really was encouraged because of her background. She was clearly very clever, very intelligent, very inquisitive, and I always kind of felt like she was striving for a bit more than she had. She passed away sadly when I was 21. But interestingly, even though she was the one trying to talk me out of going to university, after I'd left. And it kind of like, as you do when you leave university, you dump all your stuff at home, then you like move into your new house, but keep all your crap at your parents because you don't want to lose it, but you don't want it your house. My mum started reading all my sociology books because I left them there, and unbeknownst to me or anyone else in the family, she signed up for the Open University to study sociology. So she actually ended up getting a degree in the thing that I had a degree in. Or like studying for a degree in the thing that I studied, despite being the person that probably didn't want me to go to university. So that was quite interesting.
Wow.
To work with them. But they were great parents because they always encouraged me to do the things that I wanted to do and follow my dreams, not just be like stymied by the things that stymied them. Like like I'm sure. Like you do this podcast. You grew up in probably a pretty similar environment to I did in the west coast of Scotland. Like, it's not a it's not an environment that welcomes being a bit different, or like, celebrates, people that strive for success. I mean, I love celebrating success when it happens, but you're not necessarily always encouraged to strive for that success, or it's not always welcomed at the time when you are. And people love to bring you down a peg or two if they think you're getting above your station. So, you know, they even though they grew up in that type of environment and probably had that in them because you're socially conditioned by what's around you, they never really let it affect the way that they talk to me or encourage me to do the things that I wanted to do.
Do you know, by the sounds of it, you inspired your mum. That's a really nice story to come back, and she never even told you. She obviously had plotted along. Once she'd really kind of get into the subject. So that's a really nice story and something that you gifted her, I guess. And you were talking about where we're from, because you're right. The West of Scotland, it is very much don't get too big for your boots. Who do they think they are? They've not cleaned their windows today. It's very, very like that. And it's quite a although people are happy for you, there is that undercurrent of resentment, and I think it is changing as Glasgow's evolving and the world is different and people are more acceptable of things. But like for you growing up then, was there sort of key moments where you felt different growing up in Glasgow, or what was life like for you?
I mean, I think I was really lucky in that I grew up in even though I grew up in Glasgow, it was like a little village in the outskirts of Glasgow, really. So I had the kind of the best of both worlds, where I had like this kind of idyllic, countryside life,
Yeah.
but it was 15 minutes from Glasgow city centre at the same time. So, I mean, I had a pretty happy childhood. I think one of the things that's probably quite interesting, when I look around now, especially people that live down in London, like my two best friends are people that I went to nursery with in Glasgow, and they still are. And weirdly, we all work in media in some way. One of them's one of them works in a media agency as opposed to a creative agency, and the other one's a journalist. So it's but I mean, it was quite it was quite like an interesting upbringing, right? Like you have part of that stuff you always get in the west coast of Scotland, especially in a working class background. It's a little bit tough. There's all the things you had to deal with growing up in Scotland in the 80s. If you've read Trainspotting, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Then all the other parts of the west coast of Scotland, sectarianism, football, all the stuff that comes with that, which is nasty and has moments of that it's not very nice. But in many ways, when you grow up in that environment, it's just normal, right? And you deal with it. It's only now, with 20, 30 years of hindsight that you look back and go, well, maybe not everyone grew up like that, but. To say, like, I've always been kind of different. Like, I've always been a bit headstrong, always done what I wanted to do, always been interested in the things that I've wanted to be interested in, and always knew, like, growing up, the books that I read, the music I listened to, the films I was into, the way I dressed was always a bit different to like, I guess, kind of the mainstream. But I had this close group of friends, like I said, like the three of us are still best friends now, talk every day, but we're all very different. Like, one of them's a real smart guy, wears a suit when we go down to the pub. Other ones, kind of crazy journalist. We're all into different music and into different stuff. But I think that helped encourage us, to be who we wanted to be. And then also, a little bit of that kind of, Glaswegian arrogance and not really giving a shit what anyone else thinks about you. It just pushes you through to do that. So. I was never felt like I was being held back either by like the stuff around me. It's only in kind of retrospect that I kind of feel that when you reflect on it. But at the time, and also luckily like, growing up in that kind of early 90s, mid 90s, it was I think society was changing and encouraged you to be a little bit more embrace who you are and the things that you want to do and be a bit more ambitious and all that stuff as well. So I think it's just right environment, right family, right friends, right moment in time, I think really kind of gave you that springboard to like really strive for the things that you want to be in life.
Yeah, it's true what they say, isn't it? You can't choose your family, but it sounds as if you chose the right one. And you didn't even mean it. It just happens. And, when you were growing up, like, bearing in mind, working class, your parents were doing pretty working class roles, which are obviously very important in society. Was there certain things that you didn't have that you felt at the time, like, oh, I wish I could have got this or I got that? Or do you feel you kind of were given everything you wanted?
I mean, they kind of tried to give me all the stuff that they wanted. And, obviously there's stuff you didn't have, but then again, you just like wasn't any worse or any better than the people around me, like, and
Yeah.
you always, you find a way, right? And like, there's a lot of stuff, that you get through different means, right? Like, whether it's falling off the back of a lorry or your parents saved to get it, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I never felt like I was deprived in it in any way. Maybe, again, looking back in retrospect, maybe I was compared to other people my age at that time. Maybe came from the south of England, but like, you kind of make what you will of the situation you've got, right? Like, I don't ever remember feeling like I wasn't getting stuff that other people had. So, but maybe that's just says more about being happy and content, in the way that we grew up, right?
Yeah, and about being loved, isn't it? It's about having people around you that love you. And as you say, when you're on an even pegging with your friends, it's not as though you had super rich friends and you were the poor one. You were all the same. And it's the same
Yeah.
as me. Me and all my pals were the same. But for sure, there was a lot of stuff that, not that I didn't get because my mum couldn't afford it. Maybe it was more I didn't get it because my mum thought it was a waste of money.
It was,
No way, you're going to wear the Adidas two stripes because I'm not paying extra money for a third.
maybe there was a bit of that. Maybe there was a bit of that. But also, like, I guess again, this is a bit like probably a very working class Protestant thing. Like, they had me out working, having a job from from the age of 12. I think, at a paper round, and then was working in the shop and stuff like that. So, you
Yeah.
know, probably at the time I was a bit like, oh, they're making me do this when my other friends don't have to. But at the same time, I had money to buy stuff and go places and do things, right, that I probably wouldn't have had if I hadn't done that. So it's probably
That's
still
true.
well.
And you were saying, and I'm going to go back to the point you made earlier. So we're sort of getting the measure of your parents. Yeah, they're very encouraging, and they want you to be happy clearly, and they're giving you everything that they can give you possibly. So when you got into uni, what was the motivation for your mum in particular to say what you're doing that for?
I just think they thought it was like, in their mind, it was about going out, getting a job, earning money, working your way up, in whatever job you had, right? And I think they were probably amazed that I did better at school than they expected. And I think they kind of thought that I would be like, I should be out there like using those qualifications to earn money. I just don't think they really understood what university was and what opportunity it would give me, versus like just going straight into the workforce. I mean, like, I remember my dad used to always say, he'd probably say it now actually. You always want a job where you have to wear a shirt and tie. He's like, don't be like me. Get a job where you have to wear a shirt and tie. And that was his yardstick of success, right? Working in an office, he just assumed would meant you earn more money than a manual job. I mean, how wrong he is now, right? It's probably the other way around now. But so I think they just didn't have a conception of what university was for, like, especially because I didn't want to go and be like a doctor, an architect, or something like that. I think maybe if I'd done that, they'd have understood it more. I think they just thought it was a bit of a waste of time and putting off actually getting a job and earning money.
Which, to be fair, for me was absolutely the reason for doing it. I only went for 1 year, but I had to. I've said this in other podcasts, but I had to leave because I was about to be thrown out because I didn't go to class. I kind of went. I got the bursary money, and the thought of spending that money on books just made me sick. So like, I'd buy a couple, and then I think, yeah, I'm not really going to class, and yeah, they might tell me not to come back. So I forced myself out. But for you, it sounds as though you were pretty clear. Like, did you have an inkling at the time of what you wanted to do? Because obviously you were saying, like, when you get your jobs at first, you didn't really know what the kind of media scene was like, or digital,
Yeah.
or anything like that. So in your head, like, what did you enjoy doing, or what did you think you wanted to be?
I don't know. I mean, like, I knew I was like fascinated with people and the way people behaved and why they behaved in a certain way, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but for some reason, like, when I looked into it, like, sociology and anthropology was a thing that really captured my attention. I thought that was fascinating and thought you could maybe use that as a springboard to do different things. It was only when I got to the end of my time at university, I was like, can you actually do with this? And I didn't really know. And I remember, like, when I left, I I just was looking at lots of different jobs and applying for different things, and it was wild. Like as when you finish university, right? Like, it was wild, like social services through to, like, I don't know, like working in like applying for grad schemes. I don't know, like Phillips and places like that, like big organisations. So there wasn't really a plan there. And it was only when I moved down south and just happened upon marketing ever really came into the equation. I'm not sure I even really understood what marketing was, other than the PR element of it. It was only when I kind of learnt about that and moved down here that I really wanted to start progressing that, because I was like, that feels like a bit of me. Um, uh, so it was then, and even then, when I actually managed to get into PR, even though it took me a few years to do that, I actually found out pretty quickly the core elements of it I wasn't very good at. Like the actual, like, having to, like, schmooze journalists and get them to write stories just wasn't for me. Like, working the news desk, but it was actually the understanding what made people tick, or what made journalists tick, and how to create a story or a campaign or an idea that they would want to write about. So the more, what I didn't know at the time, it was strategy, but that was the stuff that it was just the way my brain worked. And I could probably, that sociology thing where I could take
Yeah.
like 3 leaps to go, oh, if a person thinks that, it's because of this, and then it's probably because of this thing, then this thing causes that. So I just kind of naturally fell into it, but there's never been a plan, never been a plan.
Yeah.
Well, a vague plan, but not
Well,
one that mapped out.
as you got more experience, I guess you get a plan. Because, I fundamentally believe a lot of the time it's who you know, not what you know. And once you get your step into the sort of area where you want to be, before you know it, if you're a good networker and you're nice to people, and I think there's a bit of karma that comes round, and it helps you accelerate. And so, for you, did you ever or do you ever think, if I hadn't moved to London, I wouldn't be where I am today? Like, do you think it's people need to move to London if you live up in the regions?
It depends, right? Like, it's definitely helped me, and if you want to work in marketing and the media in some way, it definitely helps, because there's more of those jobs down here. But having said that, I talked to my best friends earlier, and one of them lives in Glasgow, and he's a journalist that works at a PR agency as well. Like, so, and has a great lifestyle, and so it's possible, but it's probably harder work. I would have thought. I mean, it's also hard work moving down here, right? I'm really lucky in that I ended up at Motorola, filing, where I managed to persuade them to give me this job. They gave me that job, and then my boss there was also Scottish, also from Glasgow. Had a lot in common. She took a shine to me, and became like a mentor and a champion for me throughout the first part of my career, and really helped me find a place. And it would be difficult without that. Like, probably slightly easier in the industry I was in PR. When I moved to advertising, it was almost like starting again, because that's a whole different environment with a whole kind of different type of culture, different setup, especially like in the early 2000s. It was still quite old fashioned. So again, I don't think there's anything particularly special that I did, other than worked hard, applied myself, really thought about how I put my best foot forward the whole time. But then just lucky being in a kind of industry that was growing, that had an opportunity, someone that was willing to champion me, and mentor me. So, like, I think it's just being open to those things and not being closed to them, and maybe not having a very, like, formalized strict plan helped me with that. Like, having a vague direction I wanted to go in, but being quite open to the path that took me there, was probably kind of stood me in good stead.
Yeah, I mean, I do think everything happens for a reason. I firmly believe that sometimes, and sometimes you can't plan too far ahead. You can kind of have a rough idea and a vision. And don't get me wrong, when it comes to business, it's different, right? You have an action plan, you've got your strategies. I'm not suggesting people don't do that.
Yeah.
But, I think sometimes luck has got a lot to play with it. So you're either the kind of happy-go-lucky type, or you're the person with a plan, and both can work in very different ways. But see, for you, do you think, if you're looking at it now, and you're sort of looking back through your time growing up to where you are today, what is it about, do you think, being working class then that helped you get to where you are? Because surely there must be some attributes that you could pull out.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think now that I'm a bit older, I think like I talked before about my dad just loving how stuff works, and and understanding stuff, and I've always been a bit like that as well. Probably which made probably what helped me achieve more academically than my parents did. And I don't think I realised at the time. It's only in latter years I've realised this. I've applied that to myself a lot as well, which probably means that I'm probably a little bit more like self-analytical and self-aware than other people are, or maybe more willing to admit it. I don't know. Maybe that's a Scottish thing as well. I don't know. Maybe it's overly critical at times, but and I think that's helped me understand what I'm good at, but also be honest about what I'm not good at. Like as I said before, like I learned pretty quickly that I wasn't very good at lots of elements of PR, but there was an element I was good at. So like I think being honest about what you're good at, what you're not good at, where you can succeed, where you can't succeed. I think that's the first step. The second is like understanding what your like. I guess the language you probably use now is like your superpower, right? Like you hear people talk about that all the time, and it's been quite interesting as I go through my career. I think like being working class is a superpower, right? Like it can be a disadvantage, and it definitely has been, especially when I moved into advertising, where it's incredibly middle class, incredibly Oxbridge dominated, incredibly traditional, incredibly southern, where it might be all right for like to have an oik as a creative, but in strategy it was a no no. When I started at DDB, I think there was like a strategy team of like 25 people, and 20 of them were Oxbridge educated, and about half of that again went to the same college at Oxford. So it was quite hard to get into that, and it'd be quite easy to be. And you know, I've had like all those like again like microaggressions probably like you know even recently, like when I was, you know, but one of my recent employments, someone described me as a man of the people. I was like, right, thanks. Um, like, and I know, like, you know, that's a minor kind of inconvenience to what a lot of people have to deal with. But like, if you're not a strong-willed person, that can be the kind of thing that just beats you down and makes you feel this isn't a place for me. Like, I'm not welcome here. I'm being made to feel different. And I think trying to push through that and go, I'm different and I'm going to make a benefit of that has really helped. I think like it allows you to kind of stand out in a crowd, and everyone's you know comes from the same place, sounds the same, looks the same. When you don't, it can help you stand out. You sound different, you look different. You know, I'm covered in tattoos. I look different. Like I get that I can be a little bit scary to people because lots of different reasons, but I can be more approachable to other people. So I think using that as a kind of platform. I think also I kind of quickly understood, especially when I moved into advertising, that you know coming from this background, understood people probably at a level that a lot of people in the industry couldn't, even though the people they're talking to. Like I had that lived experience. I had that experience of PR, which is slightly different to advertising. Again, it's a lot more about what people want to hear. And then I had that understanding of social media as well, right at the start of it. I kind of like a lot of people come into advertising and try to be like what's there already, and I could see everyone doing that. And again, this is a self-analytical, self-aware part of me was like, if I do that, it'll just be a crap version of that. Why don't I try and be the best version of me rather than trying to be a crap version of everyone else? And just used who I was, what I knew as a springboard to be different, to show what I knew, to like almost kind of like stay one step ahead of like where everyone else was in that space, and like own something and be known for something and be known for being me. And it's not always easy, right? It's really, really difficult doing that. And some days you think, oh, why can't I just be like everyone else? But it's just not. I just don't think it's in my makeup from day one to be like everyone else. And I think being like that self awareness has helped stand me in good stead. I mean, it's got me into trouble at times as well, but it's definitely helped like set me apart from my peers.
Absolutely. And after this, we'll talk about all the trouble you get into, but maybe not. We will maybe not air it in this show. And do you know what you're saying is so true, isn't it? Because I think a lot of it's around the Glasgow hustle, you know, and it's having known that you're not given things on a plate, you have to work for it, you don't take it for granted, you know. And I kind of feel that myself. I mean, I find that doing business in America is brilliant being Scottish, and I forget your class because they don't really work in the same class system.
Yeah.
But you know, when I do business in America, people love the accent, and they always ask me to say, some stuff out of Braveheart, or I think they just take advantage of me actually. But I'm there for everybody's fun. But in all seriousness, I think people do find it, because apparently the Scottish accent is one of the most credible accents in the world, and that's why Scottish call centres do really well, apparently. So there you go. It's nice to have your accent on your side. And so when you moved to London, I mean, that must have been quite a big step. Because one thing I meant to ask is, were you an only child?
No, I've got a younger sister.
Okay. So when you've moved away, right, you've decided, because what age were you when you decided to go to London?
Probably 21.
Right, okay, God, that's age my son right now. My goodness, I can't imagine him moving away. Just, not because he couldn't, but just, yeah, no, he couldn't. I don't think he could. But if when you were moving away, what were your parents saying? So, initially they're obviously maybe talking you at uni, but now you're going to make this humongous step into the big smoke. What was going on?
I can't remember. I think they were quite supportive, if I remember rightly. I mean, they weren't very keen for me to move back home, to be honest. So I think it was like, so, I mean, I think, if I remember rightly, my mum was kind of upset that I was moving so far away. My dad was kind of easy with it, because that's kind of how he rolls.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my mum was quite upset. But in general, I think they were quite happy that I was just like, again, just like getting out there, like trying to find a job, doing something with my life. Like, and I think by that point they kind of got it. They kind of understood who I was and what it was about. So I think again they were supportive in helping me do that.
That's so nice. I mean, obviously we talked at the beginning, the fact you work for Gary Vee, and that in itself is quite a big status. Do your family see it like that? I mean, they really won't know who Gary Vee is, but do they think, oh my God, Allan has really made the big time here, or what's their impression of you?
They haven't got a clue what I do. They literally don't understand it. My dad shows me ads, like we'll be reading the newspaper and he'll point to an ad and like of a brand that he knows I've worked on probably about 10 years ago and go, did you make that ad? And I kind of go, yeah. He literally has no idea. I think he thinks that I draw ads, that I could sit down or with a pen, a bit of paper, or a computer and actually draw ads. He literally has no idea what I do. I've tried to explain it to him. I can just see him glaze over and then change the subject.
But so, they're
very proud of me, but I don't think they have any conception of like what my day to day is, or even how I earn a living.
The thing is, if you think about it, it is kind of wild, really, isn't it? Because where we're from, it's very much you work for a lot of the public sector. Public sector obviously employs loads of people up here, and it's either shop work, reception work in a distillery, or you're a social care helper or whatever it might be. And so to have a job in the media, I mean, that's just seen as a sort of elite, and it's like, oh my God, what even is it? Like, I remember growing up, I had no idea what like an editor was, what an advertising campaign was. Like, we were never taught stuff that would have been cool. I think I'd be really interested. I probably would have went to uni classes had I been taught really cool stuff. But it was just like the bog standard, and it was kind of like the olden days, wasn't it? Like, when you grow up, you can work in a reception. And as I say that, and I don't mean that to sound derogatory, because every job has a purpose in this world. So, from cleaner to CEO, you need to, somewhere in between, it's all super important. But I guess if you were to go back and sort of give advice to your younger self, what do you think it would be?
I mean, I think it would be don't give up. Just keep pushing for your dreams, right? And it's not easy. It's hard work. You have to put the hard work in. No one's going to give it to you. But I think just keep striving, keep believing, because if you put the hard work in and you focus and you are open to all the different opportunities, then it comes. It comes, and especially if you are all those things, like I said, like if you're self-aware, if you're understanding of where you are, if you're empathetic to other people and what's going on around them, like you can add value to people's lives, no matter what it is you're doing, right? Whether it's you're working in my industry or not. But you can also, you can also find your way through that. Like, I don't mean that we sound as manipulative as it does, but like, how are you going to stand out? What are you going to do? How are you going to make people want to work with you? And it doesn't matter what you do. Like, if you are a good person that's nice, fun to be around, that people feel adds value to their day, and it gets to the end of the day working with them, and you think, well, that was good fun. They're gonna want to work with you, and you're gonna thrive, and you're gonna rise to the top. Like, life's too short. I always think, to work in places like where at the end of the day you feel drained and you're
Yeah.
scared to go in the morning. Like, I've been there. It's horrible, right? It's really, really horrible. Like, and worked with people that are just want to pull everyone else around them down. Think that makes them success. If you can hold everyone else up, and like as I said before, I had a champion, right? If you can be a champion for other people, like it makes your day a dream. Just makes it happy. Just makes it a real happy place to come to work for everyone. So that's that keep believing, keep pushing, keep striving. I think it's just so important.
Do you know, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and it's also about keep believing in you because you are
Yeah.
good enough. A lot of people, especially, from places like Scotland and even other parts of England or around the world, you sometimes, depending on your environment, are brought up to believe that this is all you'll achieve. And actually, the world is your oyster. And the other point I think is really important, reverse the other way, is if you can get yourself a mentor or someone who believes in you, who'll champion you, you cannot underestimate the power of that.
Yeah.
Especially if it's somebody well connected. So, but to get to that point is tough. You have to just keep going for it, never give up. And also, if you're not getting somewhere, reevaluating what you're doing wrong. Because you can't, if you're approaching everything in the same way, to your point, you need to start being alternative. How are you going to be a bit different? So I think that's such good advice. So thank you so much for being part of this today and for sharing a bit about your family and and how they've helped you become who you are. I'm sure you're utterly grateful for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you very much for having me. And it's been a joy to share. Like, I'll just leave it in this. Even though my family are supportive and do love me and are very proud of me, they still don't let you forget, right? Like, where you come from. So I was at a family do recently where I can't, it might be my aunt, might even be my dad, made a point of saying, I can't believe you get paid so much money for doing so little. Thanks, Dad. For starters, don't earn that much money, and I do a lot. But yeah, they never let you forget. So there's like the loving jabs are still there.
Exactly. Well, and that's the way it should be. Exactly. Bring you back down to earth with a bang, of course. So, well, thank you so much, Alan, and yeah, hopefully catch up with you soon.
Yeah, speak soon. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Bye.